In 1988, Coming to America felt like a perfect comedy dream, royalty, romance, and endless laughter. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the cast didn't live happily ever after. Some vanished, some collapsed under fame, and others paid a brutal price for success. 38 years later, their lives are far darker than the movie you remember. Eddie Murphy as Prince Akeem. Born on April 3, 1961, in Brooklyn, New York, Eddie Murphy was just 26 when Coming to America premiered in 1988, perfectly cast as Prince Akeem, the charming, idealistic royal who turned a simple romantic comedy into a cultural phenomenon. By the late 1980s, Murphy was untouchable. After dominating Saturday Night Live and the box office with 48 Hours, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop, and Coming to America, he became the highest-paid actor of his generation. His ability to command the screen, often playing multiple characters in a single film, made Prince Akeem not just a role, but a symbol of his creative peak and unchecked momentum. That image cracked in 1997. Murphy was stopped by police in Los Angeles while driving with a transgender sex worker, an incident that immediately exploded across tabloids. Although no charges were filed and Murphy denied any wrongdoing, the scandal shattered his carefully managed public persona. In an era far less forgiving than today, the incident fueled mockery, moral judgment, and intensified scrutiny of his private life, marking the first major rupture between Murphy and Hollywood's goodwill. In the years that followed, a string of critically panned films, including The Adventures of Pluto Nash and Norbit, accelerated his decline. Once immune to failure, Murphy found himself sidelined, ridiculed, and quietly excluded from prestige conversations, while navigating paternity scandals and the pressure of raising 10 children across multiple relationships. By 2026, Eddie Murphy stands less as a ruler of the box office and more as a survivor of Hollywood's unforgiving cycle. His late career resurgence with Dolomite is My Name and Coming. America restored respect, if not dominance. Arsenio Hall as Semmi. Arsenio Hall was born on February 12, 1956, in Cleveland, Ohio. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, Hall was 32 years old, cast as Semmi, Prince Akeem's loud, spoiled, street-shocked companion, whose greed, fear, and exaggerated reactions provided the film's sharpest comic contrast. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Arsenio Hall show made him one of the most powerful black figures in television. Celebrities, politicians, and rappers lined up to appear. Bill Clinton's saxophone performance became a defining cultural moment. Hall wasn't just a comedian, he was a gatekeeper, reshaping late-night television and threatening an establishment that had rarely made room for voices like his. Then the fall came fast. In 1994, his talk show was abruptly canceled amid declining ratings and increasing industry resistance. Without the show, Hollywood interest cooled, and roles dried up. Attempts to transition back into film failed to regain momentum, and Semmi, once beloved, became a reminder of a past era rather than a springboard forward. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Hall became entangled in public disputes, including a high-profile lawsuit against Star magazine over false drug allegations. A legal battle he ultimately won, but one that cemented his association with scandal and damaged his marketability. The victory brought money, but not redemption. As the years passed, Hall largely vanished from mainstream entertainment. By 2026, Arsenio Hall is remembered less for how he fell than for how completely he disappeared. James Earl Jones as King Jaffe Joffer. James Earl Jones, born on January 17, 1931, in Arcaboutla, Mississippi. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, he was 57 years old, already a towering presence in American cinema, cast as King Jaffe Joffer, the stern yet dignified ruler of Zamunda, whose voice alone carried centuries of authority, tradition, and quiet power. By that point, Jones's voice had become legendary. From Star Wars to The Lion King, his deep, resonant tone defined villains, kings, and gods, earning him a rare status few actors ever achieve, instantly recognizable without being seen. In Coming to America, his performance grounded the comedy, giving emotional weight to what could have been a purely light-hearted fantasy. But behind that majestic image was a life shaped by pressure and loss. Jones battled a lifelong stutter, conquering it through discipline and performance, yet the very instrument that saved him, his voice, became a burden as expectations mounted. In 2016, he lost his wife, actress Cecilia Hart, to ovarian cancer after more than 3 decades together. The loss marked a quiet turning point, ushering in years of increasing solitude as Jones withdrew further from public life. Age brought harsher realities. His health steadily declined, and his once commanding voice began to fade. A cruel irony for a man whose legacy was built on sound. By the early 2020s, Jones officially stepped back from voice acting, allowing technology and archival recordings to preserve what his body no longer could. The silence that followed was as symbolic as it was painful. James Earl Jones died at his home in Pawling, New York, on September 9, 2024, at the age of 93, due to complications from diabetes. Shari Headley as Lisa McDowell. Shari Headley was born on July 15, 1964, in New York City. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, Headley was 23 years old, perfectly cast as Lisa McDowell, the grounded, independent woman who challenged Prince Akeem's royal fantasy and gave the film its emotional credibility. Despite the film's massive success, Headley struggled to convert visibility into lasting power. Hollywood offered few complex roles to young black actresses in the late 1980s, and Lisa McDowell became both her breakthrough and her ceiling. As opportunities narrowed, Headley drifted away from the spotlight, her absence mistaken by many as choice rather than consequence. Off-screen, her personal life unfolded under pressure. Headley married actor Christopher Martin of Kid and Play fame, and the relationship soon deteriorated into a highly publicized custody battle over their son. Court filings and media coverage exposed accusations, financial strain, and emotional exhaustion, a painful contrast to the poised image she once projected on screen. The legal fight dragged on, leaving lasting scars long after headlines faded. The combination of career stagnation and personal turmoil pushed Headley further into privacy. Now, in 2026, Shari Headley's return in Coming to America felt less like a comeback and more like a quiet reckoning with a past that never fully bloomed. John Amos as Cleo McDowell. John Amos, born on December 27, 1939, in Newark, New Jersey. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, Amos was 48 years old, cast as Cleo McDowell, the proud, hard-nosed fast food owner whose booming authority and no-nonsense discipline grounded the film's comedy in hard reality. Amos carried a long shadow before the film. In the 1970s, he was abruptly fired from Good Times after clashing with producers over what he called demeaning stereotypes. The dismissal became industry lore, quietly branding him as difficult, a label that followed him for decades. Though he continued working, leading roles thinned out, and Amos found himself repeatedly cast as stern fathers and authority figures, rarely offered depth beyond intimidation. Behind the scenes, Amos endured financial instability, legal disputes, and strained family relationships. In his later life, troubling allegations surfaced involving conflict with his adult children, including claims of elder abuse and manipulation that spilled into court filings and media reports. Though the situation remained legally complex and deeply personal, the public exposure shattered the image of the dignified patriarch he had spent a lifetime portraying on screen. As his health declined, Amos grew increasingly isolated. Congestive heart failure weakened him in his final years, while the scandals surrounding his family life overshadowed his legacy. John Amos died on August 21, 2024, at Centinela Hospital Medical Center in Inglewood, California, at the age of 84, from congestive heart failure. Madge Sinclair as Queen Aeolian. Madge Sinclair was born on April 28, 1938, in Kingston, Jamaica. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, Sinclair was 50 years old, cast as Queen Aeolian, the elegant, soft-spoken royal whose quiet dignity balanced King Jaffe Joffer's authority. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Sinclair was one of the rare black actresses entrusted with roles of command and refinement. Her performances in Roots, Trapper John, M.D., and later as the voice of Cerebi in The Lion King made her presence unmistakable. Opportunities for mature black women remained narrow, and her talent was often confined to maternal or regal archetypes, no matter how deeply she inhabited them. Behind the calm exterior, Sinclair was fighting a private war. She had been battling leukemia for more than a decade, enduring treatment while continuing to work whenever her strength allowed. The illness shadowed her career, dictating her availability and forcing long absences that the industry rarely forgave. Just 1 year after The Lion King was released, Madge Sinclair died on December 20th, 1995, at the age of 57, after a 13-year battle with leukemia. Louie Anderson as Maurice. Louie Anderson, born on March 24, 1953, in St. Paul, Minnesota. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, Anderson was 34 years old, appearing as Maurice, the flamboyant, unforgettable co-worker whose brief screen time left a lasting comedic imprint. Behind the laughter, his life was far darker. Anderson battled severe depression for decades, a struggle he later described as constant and exhausting. While his comedy leaned gentle, his private world was marked by isolation, insecurity, and the pressure of hiding his sexuality in an era hostile to openness. For years, he lived split between a public persona built on warmth and a private life ruled by fear and shame. In the 1990s, Anderson became the target of an extortion scheme involving false allegations, a situation that dragged his name through headlines and compounded his mental health decline. Though no charges were filed, the damage was lasting. Health issues followed. Anderson struggled with weight, diabetes, and recurring illness, all while continuing to work sporadically. Only later in life did he publicly come out, a moment of honesty that brought relief, but also underscored how much of his life had been spent hiding. A late-career resurgence with Baskets earned critical acclaim, yet it arrived after decades of internal damage. Louie Anderson died on January 21st at the age of 68, from complications of cancer, just days after being diagnosed. Eriq La Salle as the Soul Glow heir. Eriq La Salle was born on July 23, 1962, in Hartford, Connecticut. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, La Salle was 25 years old, appearing briefly as the arrogant Soul Glow heir, a small role that nevertheless became one of the film's most quoted and visually iconic moments. After the film, La Salle found himself repeatedly associated with flashy, abrasive characters, limiting the range of roles he was offered. The reversal came with ER. Cast as Dr. Peter Benton in 1994, La Salle finally broke free from caricature, delivering one of television's most intense and disciplined performances. The role brought awards, respect, and longevity, but also pressure. Long hours, creative strain, and the emotional weight of the character took a toll. After years on the series, he stepped away, choosing control over exhaustion. In the years that followed, La Salle shifted his focus away from acting, channeling his energy into directing and producing. He became increasingly private, rarely making public appearances, and speaking only occasionally about the importance of safeguarding his health after decades of intense work in front of the camera. Now in 2026, at 63 years old, Eriq La Salle has firmly established himself behind the scenes. While his presence as an on-screen star has faded, he continues to shape major television productions as a director and producer, with credits on series such as Chicago PD and FBI. Samuel L. Jackson as the Hold-Up Man. Samuel L. Jackson was born on December 21, 1948, in Washington, D.C. When Coming to America premiered in 1988, Jackson was 39 years old, appearing briefly as the Hold-Up Man, a blink-and-you-miss-it role that few audiences remembered. At the time, he was a struggling actor surviving on stage work and small film parts, far from the stardom his presence would later command. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Jackson was battling severe addiction to cocaine and heroin, a descent that pushed him toward financial collapse and physical danger. He later admitted he was destroying his career and his body simultaneously, living in survival mode with no safety net. The breaking point came in 1991, when Jackson entered rehabilitation. Clean and newly focused, he returned to acting with nothing to lose. What followed was one of Hollywood's most improbable reversals. His explosive performance in Jungle Fever announced a rebirth, and soon after, Quentin Tarantino cast him in Pulp Fiction, transforming Jackson from an anonymous character actor into an unavoidable force. Unlike many comeback stories, this one never slowed. Jackson became one of the most prolific and highest-grossing actors in film history, anchoring franchises, dominating blockbusters, and redefining what longevity looks like in Hollywood. The man once nearly erased by addiction became a symbol of endurance and reinvention. Today, Samuel L. Jackson stands as one of the most successful actors of all time, a living contradiction to his beginnings in Coming to America. 38 years later, Coming to America is still a comedy classic, but the lives behind the laughter were far darker than the fairy tale on screen. Some rose, many fell, and several never escaped the cost of fame at all. Which story shocked you the most? Leave a comment and subscribe as we uncover the hidden truths behind Hollywood's brightest smiles.